you can see the light that is outside. But the reason that I'm doing this live is just to go over a post that I made earlier today. So I'm going to give some people time to come in, maybe share the live, and then I'm going to start talking about some of the items that were discussed in my post today. All right, I have a viewer. If you're here, let me know if you can hear me. I would greatly appreciate it. Hi. All right. Can you hear me okay? Just making sure. All right. Some more people are coming in. I appreciate it. Okay. There is a question that I created for this discussion. If you guys can see the question, please go ahead and answer it. If you can't see the question, let me know so that I can probably post it in the chat or something. Oh, let me open it. There it goes. It was closed. Okay, so now you should be able to see it. Okay. All right. Yes, you hear me. Yay. All right, let's get started. Okay. So I'm going to quickly review the post that I made earlier today, and then we can talk about it. And please talk to me in the chat because I do like interaction. If you see the question that I posted, please respond to that as well. Okay, so earlier today, I wrote a post that said a lot of us could use some lessons on one, social determinants of health, not just diet and exercise, two, how mental health, trauma, abuse affects decision making, and three, how the solution to addiction is community and love. And I ended the post by saying shame, fear, and bullying don't work. Exclamation point. Okay. So the inspiration for this post was that I've been seeing a lot of things lately that I find one insensitive and two uninformed. And the reason I say that is, and it's based on what we learned in church or how we were raised. A lot of times people like to point the finger and blame other people, or say, oh, well, you're this way because of what you did, or you're this way because you don't know any better, or you chose to be addicted to something, or you have low morals and that's why you're addicted to this and that, or the people that are overweight and obese, they need to stop eating such and such kinds of foods, right? Or I saw a post, actually, I've seen this many times, this statement like, well, you have your genetics, but then what you eat is what really makes a difference, which that can be true. However, as I said in my post, there are actually other factors that come into play. Let me just start with the social determinants of health. If you haven't heard of these, the social determinants of health are basically your lived environment and everything that's around you that affects your health, right? And if you look at the post that I made, I did put some resources there. Someone asked me about resources. So I actually did put some information that you guys are free to read from the CDC and other sources. So here, social determinants of health is listed as education, access, and quality, healthcare access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context, and economic stability. Now, if you notice in what I just read, I did not mention diet, I did not mention exercise per se, I did not mention sugary drinks. I didn't mention salty foods. I didn't mention plant based. I didn't mention meat eating, right? I mentioned things that happen outside of yourself that can affect your life, right? So, going back here, education, access, and quality. I think we can all think about inequities in education, right, in this country, around the world. And those things do have a trickle down effect that would lead to people making poor health choices or having limited health choices. And those of you like me who grew up and maybe sometimes your parents didn't have a lot of money, you know that there are certain choices that your parents had to make based on the funds that they had. Healthcare access and quality, right? So people may say, well, why didn't so and so go to the doctor? Or why didn't so and so get this checked out? Well, based on their insurance, they may have a deductible, or they may have to wait a long time to see the doctor. And in that time, their condition could get worse. Or based on the bad experience they had before with the doctor in their insurance plan or in their network, they don't really feel like going back, right? And then, of course, bad experiences that Black people especially have had in this country. All of those things can make an impact on those choices. Economic stability, of course, basically money rules everything, and that's just the truth, right? So, for example, I'll use myself. Like, I'm a student, and we have a student insurance, and so I'm able to go to student health for free. You better believe I've been going to student health pretty often because I don't have a copay, right? Now, if I need to go to a specialist or get certain tests done, um, that might be a copay, right? Or if I had to do physical therapy, that might be a copay. So just that alone can affect my decision making and how often I would see the doctor or not. Or if I need a video visit, that's free. Some doctors, if you do a video visit with them, you still have to pay and do a copay for that doctor's time. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's just the nature of what people are facing every day, right? Social and community context. So if you're an immigrant, if you're not documented, if you're dealing with violence in your community, an unsafe neighborhood, if you're dealing with police that are coming and how can I say, being violent in your community or doing things that are wrong, how does that affect your stress level, the decisions that you make, how you care for your children, those type of things. um, Neighborhood and built environment, kind of like what I was saying just a while ago. Again, the way your neighborhood is built, the structures you have in place. I think all of us can think of some counties, neighborhoods, cities that you'd probably prefer to another one, and think about the characteristics and the reasons why that is, right? So, for example, there are some places that have more parks, have more outdoor walking spaces, have more cafes and places you can get smoothies, etc. Then there's other places where you go in. I went to a place yesterday. You go into the mall, there's a security guard in every store. It's like, oh, okay. Or there's certain rules in place. Like, well, why is it like this in this neighborhood, but not in the other neighborhood? So, like I said, these social determinants of health are not just about what you eat, what you drink, and how you're sleeping, but it's the way that the community you live in, the society you live in, actually does have an effect on your health. Another thing that we're realizing is that racism has a huge impact on health as well, right? So before, people used to say that race was a risk factor for certain conditions, but now the public health, the healthcare community is coming around to saying that it's actually racism. For example, an example I always use is maternal health. So when you see a Black woman that's educated and has money, and she has worse health outcomes than a white woman who didn't finish high school, there is racism there that has an impact on those outcomes as well. If you guys are in the chat, feel free to comment and ask me any questions as I'm talking, because I do like your interactions, as I said. Um, so, yeah, I kind of give a brief overview of the social determinants of health. And what I wanted to add to that also is that sometimes as Christians, as SDA people, or as people who may have some education, people who may be in certain fields, it's very easy to say, well, I told the person to do so and so, or, these people, they know that they shouldn't be eating fried chicken or et cetera, et cetera. And why do they keep doing it? But when you know the social determinants of health, you're actually able to take a step back and actually empathize and actually understand the systems, the structures that are in place. And that's the key that I want to emphasize. I'm going to put that in the chat actually. So, systems and structures are actually sometimes greater than individual behavior. And that's the point that I want to bring out right there. So when you say, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that, or how come you don't exercise, or oh, we had this at the church and people didn't come. Sometimes it's not just about their individual choices, it's about what's going on with them and the reason why they like I said, may have to choose a certain thing or not. There's some people that are not taking their medications that they need to, and like I said, there's usually a reason for that, but people may call them non-compliant, non-adherent, etc. And so I just wanted to invite everyone to think about these things. Look into the resources that I posted under my other post. Look into, organizations that are working on these systemic and structural issues, because that's what's really going to help the community and help people going forward, not shaming them or making them feel bad, like, oh, you have high blood pressure on your daddy's side, and that's because your family eats terrible. Okay, but let's talk about what's really going on in that family and how can you help them and help them to make better choices, or what in their environment is limiting the choices that they have. Um, okay, I see people are kind of coming in and coming out. Like I said, feel free to post comments and questions. Feel free to share this live and with other people so they can come in as well. The second thing that I want to talk about was how mental health, trauma, abuse affects decision making. Now, I don't have any like prepared materials and just talking off my head, so I'm going to try to be as correct as possible from what I remember. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, or you can add if you know some other information about this. One of the key things to remember is that trauma, violence, abuse, mental illness can actually change the way that your brain functions. It changes the way that your brain would react to certain things and how you would behave in certain situations. And so when you see someone doing things that seem irrational, or you may say, oh, that person is making bad choices in relationships, right? Or, oh, why does that person keep going back to their abuser? Again, we tend to kind of look from the outside in and say, well, what's wrong with that person? Why are they doing so and so? If I was them, I wouldn't be in this situation. But like I said, there is a reason, right? Based on what I said before, based on that change that happens when you experience something that's beyond your scope or your ability to cope with it. It does change you for sure. And sometimes you don't even identify the ways it does. And I'll give you some examples from my own experience and some talks I've had with some great therapists. For example, something may happen to you, right? Let's say someone locked your keys in your car. You may feel bad about talking to them about it because you're concerned about the other person's feelings over your own. You may feel that if I bring this up, I don't want them to be mad at me. Even though it's inconveniencing you, even though you might be running late, but your priority is the other person's feelings, or not causing a stir, or not making any waves, right? And so you may think about, a trauma you've experienced or your childhood, and you may realize that at some point you had to be quiet to preserve yourself. At some point, you could not speak out when wrong was done to you because you had to be concerned about your safety first. So even though someone's doing something to you in the present as an adult, you're still thinking, well, how can I be safe in this situation? Or how can I avoid conflict? How can I just kind of get along and not, cause any more additional problems? Or you may be subverting your own needs and saying that they're less important than the other person's because you just want to keep the peace, right? So that's an example. And so a person may say, well, why didn't you tell me, and it can be hard to articulate why. You might say, well, I just didn't feel like telling you, or it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, there's a whole plethora of reasons why you might not bring something up to someone, or you might take weeks, months, years to admit that what someone was doing to you was bothering you, right? And I could really go on and on and on, but that's just an example sometimes of when it comes to trauma and things that we've been through, how it can really affect us. The other thing is, I'm trying to think of another example. Um, it's not coming right now, but that's okay. Okay, so finally, the third thing on my post was how the solution to addiction is community and love. And I put an example in the comments there where there was an experiment with rats. There was a rat that was alone, and there were two bottles of water in the cage. One had regular water, one had, I think, cocaine or some type of drug in it. And basically, the rat that was living alone in isolation kept going back to the water with the drugs in it and basically died. And so you would say, well, why would it do that? Drugs are harmful. And then the researcher made another area for rats that had, a playground area, basically community, play, exercise, all types of things. And they found that the rats they probably did taste the water with drugs in it, but they wouldn't go back to it. They would just drink the regular water and they survived. And so that is an example of how addiction is not necessarily about a moral failing, or you chose to go out there in the streets, or you didn't have it good enough at home and so you wanted to try something, and now you're out there and look at you, you're a failure. Really, addiction can be about missing something, using it to self-soothe, to self-medicate. It can be about trying to forget. It can be about trying to avoid certain feelings. And I will add here, just like sin, we each have our own addictions. And so you may say, I don't smoke anything, I don't shoot anything into my arm, but there are addictive behaviors that we can do. We can be addicted to people pleasing. There are things that we can do to soothe ourselves or to avoid certain negative and emotions. Thank you so much, Shaika. I appreciate that comment. Yeah, definitely. So community and love. And so when you see people, let me rewind. So the crazy thing with addiction is that it pushes people away from the person with the addiction, right? Or the substance use disorder. But that's actually the very thing that they need to bring them out of that addiction. It is the community. It is the love. It is to know they're not alone. If you feel that you are basically the lowest of the low, why would you want to reach out, or why would you think that you would be successful, telling your family and friends, yeah, I know I'm addicted to so and so, but I'm actually hurting inside. Do we create those safe spaces for people to actually open up about certain things? And it's also known that a lot of people with substance use disorder have also suffered trauma. So that's another compounded issue. So again, that community and that love can really make a difference. Shaik, I would like to hear more about that when you said addiction is a response before it is a cause. I would like to hear some more about that. If you can put that in the chat, I would appreciate it. But what I think you're saying is addiction is actually a response to an issue, to a trauma. It's a response to something that has unsettled us, that has made our nervous system unregulated. And so with addiction, we use it to regulate our nervous system. We use it as a response to things that are out of order, that are out of whack. Um, but thank you for that. If anyone else has any comments, questions, feel free to post them. I thought I posted a question that asked if you had heard of social determinants of health, but I don't see it here. If you see it, I would love for you to answer it. I was just interested to see, some of the topics that I brought up, if you were aware of them before today, how familiar you were with those topics. Um, and I'm going to wrap up soon if I don't see anything else. I thank you guys for watching so far. what I wanted to say was at the end of my post, I put that shame, fear, and bullying don't work, right? This is like a universal concept. When you want someone to change their behavior, as the saying goes, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. When you shame someone, give them fear, like, oh, if you don't do this, Jesus won't love you, or oh, I want you to come pray with me. How come you're not interested in God? And if Jesus were to come right now, you would be afraid in his presence. Those type of tactics don't work, right? The person has to do the thing of their own free will. Bullying them, making them feel like an outcast, those are not the approaches at all. So just wanted to put that out there to everyone. And also a reminder that when you see memes and little pictures with little comments and Twitter posts and things like that, think about the other meaning behind what the person is saying. Think about what group of people that statement is targeting. Oftentimes, these blanket statements are saying, oh, well, single mothers, blah, 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 or et cetera, right? So I just want to admonish everyone just to think a little bit more. And if you're not sure, maybe ask someone. But when you put out these blanket statements, it can really do more harm than good. And it can be a form of shame, fear, and bullying for someone who's going through that situation and is not able to speak out or not able to be vulnerable because they feel they'll be judged and they feel that no one is there to listen to them or help them along their journey. I'm about to. Oh, okay. Thank you, Shaika, for posting that. Let's read. Addiction is a response to trauma and lack of authentic connection to others and causes further disconnection and health issues. Very true. People often think of the after effects of addiction and say, your life is bad because of your addiction. There you go. But the addiction itself is not the root issue. Definitely, definitely. Because you have to think about, well, what are the factors that would be conducive to someone having an addiction? Someone who has children, loved ones, and they're living on the street. They can't keep a stable job, or they have a stable job and they're hiding it at work, or they're in the medical field stealing medicine at work, and then one day it all comes out and tumbles on top of them. So that is a very good description. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. The addiction itself is not the root issue. It goes back a lot further. It goes back two, three, four steps. So again, it's not, yeah. So I think a little compassion, not a lot of compassion, empathy, and just understanding that any of us could be in a certain situation with the right factors, whether it's homelessness, whether it's joblessness, anything can come our way that we're not able to handle, and we could also be in a certain situation. So thank you guys so much. We've been out here for a while. I appreciate everyone watching. Feel free to leave feedback. I am going to end the live. I'll see